the meeting to order because we haven't done that. So I'm calling to order the November 13 meeting of the Montpelier Planning Commission. We have to approve the agenda and get a motion to approve the agenda from one of the planning commissioners. I need somebody from the planning commission to move to approve the agenda.
I so moved, Kirby.
Thank
I'll second.
you, Gabe.
I'll second.
And a second. We have a second
Sorry.
from Brian. Those in favor of Gabe's motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? What's that, Mike?
Nope, I didn't say anything.
Okay. All right. So meeting is in order. Mike, before the meeting started, Mike told us about the new Zoom procedures, and I think we all know what to be prepared for there, which means moving on to comments from the chair. I have one update about getting together with the housing committee. This thing has involved a lot more back and forth than anticipated, but we're going to sort something out. It's just that the housing committee wants to be able to talk to us about whatever they want to talk about, and they don't want to worry about open meeting laws being violated. So we're going to sort that out with them and figure out a way to meet. I am currently kind of opposed to holding like a whole different special meeting that's, on the record and everything. So we're just going to figure, because our ideas for this was something more informal. And I value everybody's time and don't want to hold a special meeting that doesn't have a whole lot of substantial purpose to it. So we're going to work something out with them. And I'll keep you updated. Probably at this point, it's going to happen, in a month or two, something like that. The other thing is that we are not going to meet next time. So the next time we do meet will be the second Monday of December. And that's it for updates. Does anyone else have anything else to share?
Hey, Kirby, I was wondering if you saw there's a Times Argus piece about like housing regulations being changed in Barrie. And I was wondering if you or Mike knew anything about that. It's very similar to what we're talking about here.
I haven't read it. Have you, Mike?
Yeah, I saw the article, but I don't have the specifics. I don't have a copy of any draft from Barrie City. I saw it yesterday, today, but didn't have a chance to dig in and see what they were doing.
Okay. I was just wondering if there's like any communication between.
It sounded like from the newspaper that there were some things that were similar in that it's similar in conversations to what we're doing. It sounded like they were trying to remove density from a few things. I don't know if they were trying to remove density throughout the city, but parking requirements they were going to be adjusting. I think a number of the things they're doing kind of goes back to what we did in 2018. So they hired the same consultant we had when we did our adoption that was adopted in 2018. So I think they're pretty much making that big step to the next level of zoning to kind of match what ours looks like a little bit more. So, but again, I don't have the specifics of the changes they were making.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
And one little factual tidbit that's related, Maria, and for anybody else who's not aware, like part of the Vermont system with planning is that we have regional planning commissions, and I believe it's Ariane is our official liaison, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard. Okay, we did some because I think Gabe helped out at one point. But anyway, with the regional planning commission, when towns make there's a regional plan because of these regional planning commissions that are kind of filling the void for like the lack of county government. There's a regional plan, and so when you make major changes on the like municipal level, you do have to check in with the regional planning commission. Which so Barry will be doing that, and then part of that checking in with the regional planning commission is to check with your neighbors. So eventually, like if Barry's doing a big rewrite, there's a chance that somewhere down the road that they would check in with us in order to follow all of the laws around conforming with the regional plan and all that. So that's how it tends to work. We like in the past we've had like the town of Berlin check in with us about some things they were planning, for instance, because they're neighbors.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have anything? We'll move on to general business, and don't see anyone present who's not on the planning commission. No neo-Nazi so far. That's good. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is to discuss zoning and river hazard area regulations hearing on December 11th. This is Mike passing some info on to us about the December 11 hearing. So hand it off to you, Mike.
Yeah, so we just wanted to go real quick to so if you're looking for copies because they're big, there's going to be a shortcut on the front page of the city's website. If you go to the city's website, usually, and I'll go there afterwards, we're going to make a link to this page, which is the zoning and subdivision and floodplain regulations. And right on the top is a draft. So if you want to get a copy for yourself, they're big downloads. That's why we haven't really been able to send them out too much. So there's zoning changes. There is actually a set of river hazard changes, but those are really small. The only thing those are looking at are what are called critical facilities, which is just changing the regulations for critical facilities. So hospitals, police stations, fire stations, city hall. If you're going to be in the floodplain, they're required to be 2 feet above the 500-year floodplain instead of 2 feet above the 100-year floodplain. And that's just because of the special circumstances of those facilities. Because you really shouldn't want to have them out of commission. And in some cases, it also includes things like hospitals. So you wouldn't want to have, say, a nursing facility get built in the downtown, even if it's 2 feet above the 100-year floodplain. That doesn't mean it won't flood. And if it does flood, then you've got a lot of people who have special needs that need to get evacuated, and that's a much more difficult position, which is why they require even higher standards. So it's a recommended standard at NFIP. We're doing it a little bit part of our CRS requirements. We don't think it'll have a big impact, but just because we haven't talked about it, that's what it is. But the draft zoning we have talked about. The draft zoning map is here, so we now have the draft zoning map and the list of zoning changes. That was the table that we went through. And the draft zoning regulations, which I'll show you really quick, is the strikeout version. So it's kind of a big strikeout version. So it's 231 pages. So if anyone wants a copy, I can probably send people copies, but it's a longer strikeout copy. That's what's online. But there'll be a shortcut. So if you're looking for a copy, that's where they are. And so how the hearings will be held. So a number of you have already been through this a couple of times. Nothing really changed other than what we just talked about at the start of the meeting. It'll be a little bit different, but for people who haven't gone through this before, Kirby and I just wanted to make sure you kind of had a little bit of a idea of how these are run. We really are taking this a lot like our listening session. We're here to listen to people, take input. If you have questions, you can ask questions, but generally, we don't go through and debate people on point for point. It's, of course, your meeting. You can, take it up with everyone, but usually the way this works is they tend to be a little bit more listening sessions, asking questions. If somebody has, a point they're trying to make and it's not clear to you, you can ask questions, but generally we are listening to what they say. At the end of the meeting, we'll go through and discuss what we heard and decide what changes to make based on that input. And I think we had talked about this before, that we're hoping it may make the meeting a little bit longer on December 11th. But because the meeting after that is Christmas, we're going to have one meeting in November, one meeting in December. I really want to get this to City Council in January. So if we could stay a little bit later if we need to go through and make an approval that night to send it to City Council, that would be better. If we get too much and it's just we're in a position where we're not comfortable to move this to City Council, I'm not going to ask you to force you to move it forward. You just make a decision that we'll talk about it more in January and we'll take that time. But if you kind of hear from a bunch of folks and you're like, yeah, we'll make this change, but we won't make those changes and let's move this forward, then that would be a big help to keeping it on time, because what we don't want to do is have the zoning hearings go past town meeting day, because then we might end up with new counselors and they may rewarn new hearings. So if we can get all the hearings in and have council adopt it before the end of February, then that's good for getting the zoning amendment passed. Are there any questions on that? The process or the rules?
Mike, one of us, since Carlton's new and he's not here right now, one of us should probably give him some kind of heads up. I can try to reach out to him if you want.
Yeah, if you have an opportunity to, because a little bit of this was to help him out too, and he's not here, but
yeah, I can try to get in touch with him, because I had the orientation walk and talk with them recently.
Good.
We can follow up. Okay, is everyone's ready for the hearing? I'm going to circle back real quick, and I had Googled the thing that Maria mentioned earlier just to check in, and it looks like I wasn't aware, but it looks like the housing committee spoke to the city council recently. Rebecca Copans.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any updates there that line up with our stuff, or anything there?
I wasn't at the meeting. My understanding was that was really focused on the housing committee has proposed a new ordinance regulating short-term rentals, and that was kind of the focus of their presentation, was to try to have the council advance a short-term rental ordinance very similar to Burlington's, just as a general box of how Burlington handles it. So that's what they're looking at.
Okay. I don't think we went there with the city plan, did we?
No,
Yeah.
I don't think so. It hasn't, at least over the past couple of years when we were talking with the housing committee before, the perception was that it wasn't a big issue. And even the housing committee said that a little bit to that effect. They kind of said it's not a big issue now, but we want to be ready in case it does become a big issue. So it's one of those.
Yeah. It seems like the best thing we can do is actually have a hotel in this town.
I'd take a couple of them.
Yeah. Like seriously, I mean, that's one reason probably why Airbnbs do have a market, is people don't have another choice. Okay. Thanks for that update, Mike. And yeah, it sounds like we should get in touch with housing committee and talk. Okay, so I'm going to move on the agenda. And all we have left tonight is to look at the storyboards for energy and economic development. I went over those today. I don't know if anyone else got a chance. But I can.
I unlocked the share screen, so you should be able to grab it now.
Okay. Everybody see the energy chapter? Okay. This one I actually didn't do a lot with. But I just had some comments. I don't know if you know this, Mike, but some of these storyboards have yellow text, and I was just wondering if they're yellow because there's some kind of vision for are these meant to be like pulled to the side or highlighted in some way? Do you know?
I don't know why those were put in by SE Group, and I'm not sure if that's because they're going to be special tags or not. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. So yeah, I'm just curious to like pass along to them if they have some vision for it. I think having some dynamic things on the page is nice if that's what they're planning to do with that. And that's what I'm assuming, and that's because it looks like it's a bit different in the way it's written compared with the text other places. I was thinking we mostly don't say city council, so I was just thinking that we could. Oops, I don't want to.
True. Yep.
The thing there is just we tend to say city, and then even though obviously a lot of the activity that's done by the city is done by the city council, just keeping that consistent. And then I compared the storyboards with what we had prepared before, and I saw that most stuff was taken for this chapter. Most of it was taken as it was in the other place. The next thing I had on here was that there was a comment about what kind of infographic they should use, and I'm assuming guest user is someone from SE Group. And so I was just planning to pass along some feedback to them that if there's going to be an infographic on an energy related topic out of all these here, I would say that it's probably best to lean towards renewable energy, which some of these do touch on, like the solar array one. So I don't know, I was just past that. So I left a comment just that I think renewable energy would be what people are most interested in when they engage with the energy stuff, and it seems to be the biggest concern. Everybody else feel that way? Yeah. And then there's just a spot here where like we had a for example, and it seemed like it flowed with the rest of this. So I would just suggest that they move that back up and make these first two paragraphs one paragraph. But I didn't think the sentence in the middle was helpful, and it wasn't part of our stuff from before. It seems to be some kind of introductory, like this section reviews shared issues, like kind of like what the synergies do. I don't know. It didn't.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's it for. Yeah, that's it for any editing type comments I had on this one. Did anyone else see anything in the energy chapter that they'd like to bring up?
Yeah, most of this had been reviewed previously because so much of this was pulled from, we wrote a chapter for anyone who maybe wasn't here for that. We actually wrote chapters for all of these. And then at a certain point, we had to convert them to storyboards. And so they went through and wrote a bunch of storyboards, and we really didn't like them, or they really weren't getting a lot of good positive response. We kind of told them, why don't you just take from our chapters? So that's when we kind of went back and kind of compare them now. So most of the language you see are things that either Kirby or I or somebody has written, not SE group. So it should sound a little more like what we usually write.
Okay, I'm going to move on to economic development. Everybody see it?
Yep.
I somehow lost your faces.
Well, we're still able to see you.
Okay.
Maybe if
I just want to make sure I had some visible feedback options here to see, make sure I can see people. Okay, economic development. This one did look like it was rewritten in places because it wasn't exactly the same as what we had gave. So, but it doesn't look like I did a ton. So just some like wordsmithing stuff in the beginning to make it a little bit more succinct. And same down here. We've got the yellow text again. So just curious if what exactly the idea there is. This is comment.
that's a comment I had, yeah.
Okay. Oh, so you're guest user. Mystery solved. Okay. One thing that when we spoke with SE Group last time, I forgot to bring this up, but I thought of it later. We were really excited by the idea of having an infographic that showed Montpelier's, or not an infographic, but like a map, like a dynamic map that showed Montpelier's development over time. And I should have brought it up with them last time, but hopefully that idea is not dead. Hopefully that's something they can do because we were excited about that. That could be something that's, either on the main page or the historic preservation maybe page. But I just wanted to bring that up with you, Mike, to if you're in touch with them soon, to let them know that we're still interested in that. Okay. So we have this stuff. That's the thing I just mentioned there, my comment there about the map. And then just the city council removed there. And that's it. Down here, I removed the word new from Caledonia Spirits just because that's something that will be outdated, soon. It won't be soon. And that's it for me. Did anyone else have anything or anything to say about the economic development chapter?
Kirby, I just had a comment about that first paragraph where your pointer is. It seems like we don't really know the effects of remote work versus people being home and able to shop downtown because they're not going to work in Burlington or elsewhere. I don't think we really know what those trade-offs are, do we? That there isn't any data about that? Mike, do you know? And this whole paragraph feels is like it feels like it could have an effect on our economy, you know? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
but
that's
we don't
a
really
little of what.
know.
Yeah, it's one of the two mysteries. One is how is remote work going to affect us, and that can affect a lot of things. The offices, offices are now more vacant, so that's going to have an impact on that part of the commercial real estate market. Those could always be converted to residential units, and that's fine. But there's obviously going to be an economic change that remote work will bring to that side of things. But all those workers, our population swells in Montpelier during the day. So we're a town of 8,000 people. We grow to about 14, or we did pre-COVID, we would grow to about 14,000 during the day with all the workers. And so that's an extra 6,000 people who shop and spend money and go to restaurants and everything else before going home, or leaving work and going to a restaurant before they go home. So there's a big difference having people moving in. So we've lost those, let's say post COVID, we're now in an environment where people are doing more remote work. We've lost those people. Well, now we have more people staying at home in Montpelier. So we've gained some people, we've lost some people, we've gained some people. What's the net? What's the net? Does it have a big difference? And I think we're just going to have to wait to find out how that all shakes out in the end. So I think it's more of a question. So remote work is one of the big ones. The other one is the online shopping, and that's been going on for obviously 6 or 7 years now. That was going on before COVID. We were talking about what is going to be the impact of online shopping. 15 or 20 years ago, it was what is the impact of big box retailers on our downtown retailers? Are all the businesses going to be vacant in the downtown because everybody's up shopping at Walmart in Berlin and Williston? And that was a question. We just didn't know how much of an impact. We knew there was going to be an impact, and clearly it had more of an impact on some businesses than others. And this is going to be the same thing. The continued growth of Amazon and these other companies, how is that going to impact our downtown retailers? I don't know if it will. It will impact some niches and it won't impact others as much. But those are the two big question marks, I think, that are out there when it comes to economic development in our downtown. Just trying to see where.
I think we also, last time we reviewed this was before the flood. I mean, the state and federal workers, have they returned to their offices at all?
I don't know, Kirby might know more about the state workers. I believe state workers have partially come back. I think when I've talked to a number of people at like ANR, they come into the office once or twice a week, but they're still predominantly working at home.
It's like 20%, maybe 25% at best.
Is that 20 or 25% compared to before the flood or before COVID?
Pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So the only thing I'll just say generally is I think it's really poorly written, and the document that we worked on like a year ago that's in the folder is better. So I'm not quite sure. I know they were trying to like make it a little bit more succinct, but I remember Kirby did put a lot of work into sort of crafting some language, and I'm not sure what they did has made it any better. I mean, I understand they pulled it from what we wrote, but I don't know. It's just not very good. Sorry.
From looking at this today, I saw that they pulled pieces, which did impact the flow, and made it.
And I made some of those changes. So they made a storyboard template, and I noticed it really didn't match our economic development chapter very well. So I went back and pulled pieces of the economic development chapter in, but it was very long and their introductions were short. So I think if you look at our introductory chapter, we had 4 paragraphs. And so I cut it down to 2 paragraphs. And I think the 4 paragraphs are better, but it's just much longer in comparison. And therefore, it really became a little bit more difficult. You know, it's tough to shorten it up. And our
Yeah, and I know,
Oh.
we'll have community input, and it'll end up being like really bullets, and so maybe I shouldn't get so worked up about it. But I just read it, I'm like, this is like, it's not even USA Today quality, like economic. It's just bad. I'm sorry. It's just like, it's not. I mean, I know what we're trying to do, right? And what it'll end up being is something very different. So I shouldn't get so worked up about it.
No, I mean, and certainly if people find better ways, I mean, as you know, as Kirby pulled this up, you can see a lot of the pieces that had kind of been cut out. A lot of what I was trying to do was to capture some of the big pieces. Again, I think maybe everybody was here for when we did economic development, but really economic development broke into 2 pieces. One chunk was talking about the businesses, and the other chunk kind of talked about the workers. You know, what do businesses need to be successful for economic development? What do workers need to be successful workers to prosper? So in the workers side, we're talking about we need affordable housing, we need childcare, and we need good transportation because a lot of people commute. If you live in town, not everybody can afford cars, and if we want to have an economy where everybody has an equal opportunity to participate, then we need to have a transportation system and businesses set up in a way that we can all participate. We can't exclude people because they either can't afford to drive or don't have the ability to drive. So we had the worker side of things, and we have what do we do to make businesses more successful, and that's a completely different side. So we have to have 2 conversations within this chapter, one about the businesses and one about the workers. And then when you write everything that we wanted to, which we did, and it was great, but it's like a page and a half.
Yeah, so this paragraph that I've highlighted here is where the storyboard starts. So the material above it was not included. And then there's, I think like this one is included. So a lot of it was, there was, judgment calls made about what parts to put in, and I'm not sure. I mean, we should have this conversation though. Gabe, I can stop sharing the original here and go back to the, chapter. So, Gabe, let me ask you one question. What were your thoughts about energy and the state of it?
I think I had not had as much input into the energy, so I didn't know. It seemed fine to me, but I don't think I had joined the board at that point. And so this was like the first one that we had worked on together when I had joined the board, whatever it is, 2 years ago, 18 months ago. And so I remember working through it, and then I just looked at what we had written. And again, I get it, right? We do have to, it's a website, right? It's a web-based plan. And I'm not suggesting that we, wordsmith it here or now.
Right.
My overall comments is that it just doesn't read very well. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. I just looked at this one today, and I did, I had the same feeling in looking at it today, just the way it was. So we have this other material to pull from. We could also just take the info that's provided here and rework it. And this is probably, I think, what we will end up doing. We can just rework, like this was the information that was pulled out as significant when Mike was working with the SE group. We can just, so instead of just deciding, like, you know, instead of deciding that, we can take this info and we could rework it to make it kind of flow better for this. Is there?
I mean, obviously, those are what the things Mike brought up are the right things, right? Like, this is what we really need to be focused on. The transportation, childcare, like, how do we create this environment? I think it is. We are in a very like unknown situation. How the downtown's going to reinvent itself. I mean, the state hasn't made strategic decisions, and they're maybe a year away from making strategic decisions about what their workforce in town will look like. Right? I mean, they've got a bunch of buildings and they're sitting on them. They're not sure. And that impacts the downtown, right? I mean, if you were here and, saw what things were like in 2018 or something, and then you saw what they were like in 2021. And then, now we don't know. So I think acknowledging that there's some things that are in flux that we don't know, I think that's okay. I don't know that we need to look into a crystal ball about it. We just can say, look, there's a lot of things that are uncertain as we talk about our future, but I think those are the key things. It's just how does it flow? And maybe it doesn't, again, once it's on a web page, it's not going to really look like this anyway. So maybe it's not worth spending a ton of energy on.
Well, I was going to ask is anyone interested in this little project? Just to massage this storyboard in the next couple weeks.
I mean, I can make a stab out.
In the end, what's the sort of highlight? Like, what do you want to do? Make it concise?
I think the goal would be to say all the same things, but to make it flow and be more readable for people. Because this one suffered from being taken out of the context of the other material. So that would be the goal, Aaron. Just be like,
Yeah, I can do it. I just
professional level.
Yeah, I can take a stab at it. I just wanted to make sure I'm not going to have really the capacity to go back to the old graph that we did and sort of graph that stuff back in. But I can work with what this is and try to make it smoother.
Okay. Appreciate that. And you don't need to, I mean, you could go back. It's there in the shared drive just if you wanted for context, but just taking the same information and just.
I'll take a look at it, but it's just once you start getting to cutting and pasting across two documents, you just get bogged down really quickly. So, I can do that.
Okay, so we'll just polish this one up more, and Aaron will do that. Sounds good. Is that good with you, Gabe? All right, good with Gabe.
Yeah, and it should just need the introduction and the planning context, because the synergies, goals, and aspirations, and who's involved, those shouldn't need to be changed. They're all okay.
Right.
It's just up top.
So aspiration and goals definitely don't change, as you know, Aaron. That's set in stone. I'd say if you want to take a stab at the style of the other one, so that as far as I'm concerned, they wouldn't be off limits. Okay, that sounds great. Thanks, everybody. Did we have any more comments about economic development or energy? Or about the vision for the website, infographics, things like that we can pass on?
Well, Kirby, my question is like, do we even talk about the flood in all of this? Because I mean, this was written obviously before the flood. And it seems like we're just assuming that everything's going to go back to the way it was as of like June 2023, and it might not. Do we leave room for that? Do we acknowledge it? I think all of us really want it to go back to June 2023. but I don't know if that's what's actually going to happen, you know. But then you also don't want it to be a document that, you know, in 2 years' time doesn't make sense because maybe Montpelier is completely restored and, you know, the flood is like in the way past. But I don't know, how much should we refer to it or even discuss it?
Like, I think for sure that we'll bring it up in the land use plan in the chapter. This chapter language is not legal, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's just, it's just given that, if we want to acknowledge the flood, we can do that. We don't have aspirations and goals about that here, but we do have them in places in the plan, right, Mike? I mean, before the June flood, we were still planning for these things. Is it natural resources chapter, Mike, that mostly deals with?
Yeah, natural resource. I mean, it should probably, if it isn't referenced in synergies, we should have it. There would make sense for us to add something in there, and we could add something up top just to go through and say it's part of the unknown. We just don't know. I mean, it's impacted commercial property owners, it's impacted businesses, and that'll be a third piece. I mean, it's interesting and hard to figure out how to tell the story of economic development. I mean, we've got those economic forces that we talked about. We've got COVID. We've gotten the flood, of which are events that have happened, and so it kind of makes things. How do we talk to people about? These are all the things that have kind of shaken up that snow globe, and we got to kind of see how things go now. Maybe, as Maria says, maybe 2 years from now, we're all not even thinking about flooding until the next time it rains hard. Or maybe everybody is still on the front of everybody's mind because we have a second smaller flood next year, and it becomes, there are communities, in Maryland, there's the one in Maryland there that had 2,000-year floods in 2 years. We're not exempt from being hit again in a very short span. And what would that do to us economically? So I think we just have to look at, tell that story somehow. These are the things that we're looking at. There's a lot. I don't know if I would want to, investing money in a downtown building now. You're investing in housing kind of seems like a pretty successful investment. Investing in commercial development in the floodplain in Montpelier, I don't know. That's more of a challenging question for investors.
This is kind of placeholder stuff. Okay, so I just threw like a placeholder thing in there to acknowledge that here. You're right, Maria, and I guess I've not always been responsive because this isn't the first time you brought up like flood stuff, and it's like, oh man, yeah. To what extent do we want to go back and integrate? We know that it's covered in the plan in like places, right? We just yeah. How much do we call it out? I think in land use, it's going to be the elephant in the room, and we're definitely going to have to do that.
I think we're going to hear about it, don't you think? I mean, I think people will bring it up in hearings.
Uh-huh.
But then, I mean, I think the economic development part of it is just how much money all of our businesses, small businesses, and commercial landlords have had to take from, like Montpelier Live has been giving out grants, like how much they've been supported in the past 2 or 3 months. And that's, I mean, it definitely hits one of the aspirations and goals. Like, I think the city and Montpelier Live have helped keep some of these businesses afloat. So, I mean, they are doing that work. It's not like we're making this up. And it's also not like forward, it's not future looking. Like, this is what has happened and what will probably continue to happen, that we will have to, come and help out the businesses every time something like this happens. If our downtown is going to be located where it currently is.
This is a bigger conversation and something for the land use plan chapter that we're going to be developing soon. But I definitely have in my mind that we should at least point out the possibility of downtown growth going uphill in places. And that's not something that's been talked about a ton in city planning in Montpelier before, but at the very least, I feel like our land use plan should have like room for that decision to be made down the road. You know what I mean? Because the city plan is really about guiding future decision making, and so if we suggest that that's a possibility, that it could just enable the city to go that direction. I think I mentioned before about going up East State Street up to the College Green and making sure that we allow mixed use and commercial stuff up that way. And if the businesses choose to try to concentrate that way because of flood concerns, that it's possible. But it's a bigger conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think businesses should be located downtown, personally. I think that's probably the right place for them to be. But saying that, it's also going to be part of the city's responsibility to literally bail them out. If this is where land use decides is the best place for a city to be, then it will also be up to the city to support those businesses when they do get flooded. And that's kind of like what we've seen the past couple of months. And I think it's just like a reality that this is how Montpelier will probably be functioning from now on. Everyone has this memory of this flood in the background. And so, yeah, when, someone's looking to start up a new business downtown, they will definitely be thinking of, what happens if all my inventory is flooded? This is, so I think the city is going to have to pay attention to flood risk from now on. And we can't always, these aren't going to all be new buildings. Like, the buildings that are currently there will probably continue to be occupied by somebody. Anyway, I just think it's like an important thing to note in this chapter, that supporting, the economic development of Montpelier is also supporting flood risk and flood relief when floods do happen.
So I chose, just in this filler language I just threw down, I chose to focus on the mitigation and adaptation because I do think that we can't control like what the market is going to be doing, but I can only assume that many landlords are going to be trying to flood proof, so to speak, the downtown buildings so that the economic damage isn't so severe in the future. But it's not something that we regulate it to some extent. But I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I don't believe that we're telling every downtown business that they have to fill in basements and raise things, right?
No, not unless there's a substantially damaged building, and historic buildings are exempt. So for the most part, that's going to take care of that. So we've got about 100 buildings downtown that were hit pretty hard. And so certainly going through and working with them and trying to come up with plans. Like we said, we were just talking about, we've got vacant office space. Maybe that vacant office space is converted to storage for inventory, as opposed to putting inventory in your basement. You put your inventory on the second floor with what used to be office space. Maybe there's some other model that works as well for being able to store and do things. We're just gonna have to work with people. But then our other goal is to start to work with property owners, and this isn't going to happen until next year. We're going to try to get what's called a brick grant, which will do some scoping work for downtown buildings. And it's just a building by building inventory where we can give recommendations to property owners on what are the best things you could do. And again, in some cases, maybe it doesn't, the flood we just got, you're going to still get flooded. But if we get a flood that's, a 50-year flood event, you don't get damaged because we've been able to flood proof up to a certain level that helps to make smaller floods less damaging. And maybe we can find ways to make larger floods less damaging as well. If we can elevate or if we can use floodgates. This storm we had advanced knowledge of, so we would have, if people had floodgates, they would have had plenty of time to put up the floodgates. And that's just a matter of designing those, making sure buildings have been completely looked at to make sure there's no way for the water to get in. And they can get in through backflows. A toilet in the basement that doesn't have a backflow preventer, as soon as the water ends up in the sewer, it just comes out. So you've just got to look at every possible place that water can sneak into a building. Second floor of City Hall was flooded because the roof drains were tied into the water fountain. And so when it was raining hard and the sewer underground filled up, the water filled up the pipe and water came out the water fountain. Who knew? But that's how the second floor of City Hall got flooded. So that's why we don't have offices on the second floor, because that still has to all get repaired because of all that water damage. But those are the things that you try to identify in these studies of each of these buildings, is how does water get in, and then finding ways of sealing up the buildings as much as we can. So that way, if we know a flood is coming, we can put a flood door on and keep the water out. And in other cases where there's a new building getting built or some other significant work is getting done, maybe people do fill in the basement, because that's the best remedy. Fill in the basement and elevate the building and put in a small elevator that lifts people up, so you've got ADA access to a building that's a little bit higher. And you'll see that there was a proposal to do that for the 1216 Main, where the Beverage Redemption Center used to be, that now right next to the drawing board, there was a proposal to put a building in there. It would have been 3 feet above the ground, above the sidewalk. It just would have had a little lift for ADA access. There was a proposal for over next to the Pavilion building, that vacant lot's owned by Tom Lozon. He had a proposal to put in a bank. He's also had a proposal to put in residential units there. Same idea. That had to be elevated 6 feet because of how deep the flood water is over there. So there are ways of doing it. You elevate the buildings, you put in an elevator, and you can make these buildings, new buildings, work. And then for the existing buildings that are historic, we try to floodproof them. And it won't be 100%, but hopefully it works much better than we just experienced, which was to have very few buildings floodproofed.
Mike, I have a couple of things. First, when we talk about raising buildings up, should we actually, as the Planning Commission, be thinking a little bit about the height limits downtown and whether we should raise those? Because, you know what I mean? Like like it would help the ability to adapt by going up. as long as people aren't losing, total space possible. So if we raise the height limits,
Oh,
you know what I mean? How that
yep.
logically connects. What would be the opposition to increasing the height limits by, say, like a story based on where we are now?
For the downtown, it probably won't matter because I believe the downtown is measured at 6 stories. I don't think it actually has a foot requirement. I would have to double check on that. So whether your first floor starts 6 feet above the sidewalk, you'd still get 6 stories.
How
But
many?
I would have to check.
How many of the buildings are actually at 6 stories? Any of them?
The Capitol Plaza has a section, I believe, that goes all the way up to 6 stories. Most of the building is 5 or 4 stories, but there is one small section, I think, that goes up to 6.
Okay. So we already are allowing most of these buildings could add height, but they're not.
Yeah, not too many buildings are near their max height.
Okay.
That not that I'm aware of, and certainly if people come up and say that that's an issue, we certainly can come back up and make a proposal to increase that height.
My other question is, and this is something that occurred to me when the flooding happened, but I kind of let it go because no one else ever mentioned this, and it might be like a childish idea, but like deepening the North Branch, has that been considered in any serious way? Or is it
we always get proposals and ideas like that, building tunnels under the river to let the water move. The reality is the amount of water that's moving and the amount of water that's there when you have a 100-year flood event like we did in July, it becomes negligible on the amount of water, because it's not a static pool of water, it's moving water, and I want to say it's moving. I always try to mix up because there's cubic feet per second and gallons per second, and I always mix the two up, but it's like 20,000 cubic feet a second or 20,000 gallons a second, and when water's moving that fast, it fills up whatever. So even if you I think somebody had proposed maybe we put a tunnel under Elm Street, starting from like Cumming Street all the way down through town. If we built a 50-foot wide, 10-foot high tunnel all the way down there, would that move the water and keep us from flooding? And the truth is that would be filled in about 61 seconds with the amount of water that's flowing, and then it basically would just still flood. It just takes 61 seconds to fill that space. So
the problem is when it hits the Winooski, there's nowhere to go, so it backs up.
Yep.
So it doesn't. Yeah. Okay. That's too bad. It would be nice if there was some engineering solutions.
Yeah, there's a lot of people always take looks at those. A lot of the big ones have been done. I mean, this was a substantial event. So 1927 was 8.6 inches in 72 hours. This was 6.8 inches, so less, but it was in 36 hours, so half the time and slightly less water. So this was actually, I would argue, probably almost a worse event than 27 because it just it just rained so hard so fast. But we had the advantage this time of having all the flood control dams that are upstream from us. So we end up with 5-6 feet of water in the downtown as opposed to 10 feet of water in the downtown. And that's because of the flood control dams. So there's not a lot we can do. The flood control dams were the biggest savior that we had. I think the successes, and I'm sorry if I've mentioned this to other people before, the successes to look at were the our modeling that we had for this type of event said, build to a 100-year floodplain. So city center was built to a 100-year floodplain, and the water got just up to the edge, just lapping on their doorstep. So city center stayed dry because it was built to the flood stage. The transit center was built 2 feet above flood stage and was perfectly fine. And a number of other places were also built above flood stage or had pieces of their buildings or utilities. For the past 5 years, we've been requiring people to put heat pumps 2 feet above base flood elevation. And so there's been a lot of projects that stayed dry. And so there is a certain amount of proof out there that if you elevate your building and you elevate your first floor 2 feet above the floodplain, then you are far less likely to flood. And that's what we've been hanging our hat on in the planning department, is saying, we're trying to get money to elevate mostly the residential buildings, Elm Street, Lower State Street, not the big commercial brick blocks, but those residential buildings. We want people to be safe in their house, whether it's a rental unit or whether it's a regular single family home. We want to have those elevated, have no basements, get them elevated above base flood elevation, because then people are safe, people are dry. And then we'll work on the commercial blocks afterwards to get them flood proof. Certainly it would be great if we could elevate those, but elevating brick buildings that's not easy. So that would be more challenging, but that's certainly the best solution. Then water's going to flow around your building, the water's going to go down, and you're going to open your business back open the next day. But not every building will have that opportunity. But that would be the goal over the long term, is that we just keep building by building, getting these guys put back, either elevated or flood proofed.
Thanks,
But
Mike.
as Maria says, there is, I see it as part of, there is a public component to that. We can't ask property owners to bear all of those costs on their own. So there has to be a place where either the local, we could do tax stabilizations at a local level. At the state, can the state put in money, or the federal government, can we get federal money to help pay for those costs? So that way businesses and commercial landlords have the assistance they need. They're going to have enough money they've got to put into the project, but if we can defray some portion of those costs to make these more financially acceptable, because ultimately we can't really require people to do it. We have to really show up with some money to say we're going to cover some of the costs of this and help the commercial landlords and the businesses flood-proof those buildings, because it's good for all of us. The flooding doesn't just hurt businesses when they lose all their inventory. It hurts everybody. I mean, everybody suffered by having this downtown shut down for months. So it really benefits all of us to have the government kind of help us be more flood resilient going forward. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
That's all right. I've, just unofficially, I've heard that we can expect a flood relief bill to pass early in the session, by the way. So no idea if the money that Montpelier wants is going to be in there, but it sounds like they're going to do multiple flood relief related expenditures. Okay. Everybody want to move on to the minutes? Get a little bit of time for yourself. Okay, so Mike has sent the minutes separately, I believe. We're just going to review the October 23 minutes. If anybody has any adjustments, let us know. Otherwise, we'll just pass them out as is.
Oh, I noticed at the end of the minutes, it says I made a motion, but I wasn't there. I don't know if that matters, but
Yeah, I wasn't there either. So, I mean, at least insofar that the motion is to not do anything, is to leave. I think we can at least leave that in. Like, we're good. Phantom motions.
Yeah, I don't know how to correct that. Maybe that probably has to do with, I'm assuming that there's like a template and these get adjusted to save time. And
My notes didn't have anybody making motions to adjourn. I think we just left.
okay. So we can amend the minutes to reflect that.
I'll just say meeting adjourned.
Yeah, you could say Kirby adjourned using his dictator powers. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the minutes with the amendment to the adjournment? Anyone?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Okay, motion from Brian to approve, including the amendment, correct?
With amendment.
Okay. Do we have a second to Brian's motion?
I'll second.
Second from Maria. Those in favor of approving the minutes with the amendment, say aye.
Right.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. Minutes approved. So next time we see one another will be for the hearing. We'll get going promptly on December 11th to make sure that we have time, because we want to try to wind down the hearing Mike, what you need from us as a reminder, you need for us to vote after the hearing?
Yeah, it'll be a motion to forward the drafts. There'll be two, because one's the river hazard, one's the zoning, to forward the drafts to city council for consideration.
Which means if we want to change anything up, we'll need to be prepared to do that right after the hearing. So if we're going to have any discussion or anything, so we'll try to be efficient with that. But I also don't want to stop anyone from being able to participate. In this case, I mean any planning commissioners who want to make a change or want to discuss something that came up at hearing. Don't feel rushed. What were you going to say, Mike?
I was just going to say, we'll see who shows up and how many people show up. We've had these zoning amendments where we'll have 5 people show up, and it's pretty quick to move it on through. And in other cases, we've had an entire, usually they're in person, and we'll have an entire room full of people.
What we have going for us is that we have the listening session, and that may help people feel okay. And what we don't have with this is we don't have any major construction projects involved asking for changes and things, because in the past that sometimes the whole community will come out because there's an imminent thing in their mind. We don't have something like that this time, so that might lower the numbers. So yeah.
If you're talking to the housing committee, it doesn't hurt to ask them to kind of show up and give a little bit of support for some of the changes.
Yeah, well, the support we need is going to be when it goes to city council. That's when we're really going to want to make sure that that people who are in favor of this are aware of when it goes to city council. So FYI to everybody, if you're going to call in favors for friends or just letting your neighbors know or whatever, then it's the most important thing is when it goes to city council. It's not going to be this hearing. Okay. So with that, we can adjourn, and we can do it with a whole motion and everything if we want. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Kirby.
I knew you were going to do it. I could tell. Do we have a second to Gabe's motion to adjourn?
Aaron?
We're gonna count it. Aaron, he may have burped or he may have seconded the emotion, but
Second.
All right, there we second. Second from Aaron. All right. Those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Hi.
Hi.
See everybody in December.
Merry Thanksgiving.
Have a good Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yeah, have a
You
great
too.
Thanksgiving.